Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be discussing what recruitment agencies charge, how much they charge, and how it all works. Now, the reason I'm making this video, a lot of people have suggested to me that they want to charge a higher amount. So I want to talk a bit about personal experience, what I charge working at a company, and through my own business, what I also charge as well. So in front of me is the sort of sectors. So depending on the sectors, the price does vary. Now it usually works off a percentage amount. So for example, if I open up a text file, so typically it works off a salary. So if somebody's salary is 30,000, if you charge 10%, the fee would be £3,000. Now depending on if you work for an agency, you'll probably be getting 10% of the 3,000. Just to be clear on that, so you'll be getting £100 in commission, or £300 in commission, sorry, for your placement there. And that's typically how it works. Now, going back to the industries, many of them vary. Now, when you get up to the sort of higher level and it's on a retainer based, you can be working on, upwards of 20%. It's not unheard of for 30% to be charged. Now, this could be a CEO, and usually it's very it's a very long process. It's the headhunter level. So what you'll typically be doing is the client may say to you, look, we're a major company, we only want a chief exec or somebody, a chief of finance at a certain level. So they have to work for either Google, PayPal, one of those big brands that everyone knows about, or FTSE 100 company. And what you do is you'll be calling them, you'll be arranging meetings, you'll be cold calling them at work, see if you can get a sort of meeting with them. It's a very long process, but for this video, I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to talk about the sort of standard, quick, easy fills, or things that take possibly a month to fill from, meeting the candidate to actual interview and placement. So if I just take, for example, finance, as a sector example, typically finance usually works off 15%, would be the average. Now it's about 15 to 20. The reason being, it's the pricing. No matter what anyone says, the price is led by the companies that are willing to pay it. Now, if you're in the sort of engineering or possibly automotive sector, the fees typically are much lower. You can I've heard of people working at 7%. Now, typically you'll be looking at 10 to 12% on average. Anything else than that, anything lower than that, will be, not as good. If you can get 15% in that sector, it's very good as well. Now, just to talk on how much you should charge working within an agency. Now, I had full autonomy when I work, and I always like to work like that. So when I'm negotiating fees, I'm quite aware of the sectors, I'm aware of the industry average, and also I have a number of clients that are paying different percentage. So I could have a client as low as £2,000 as a flat fee, which we negotiated. I know for a fact that I will probably fill that role very easily. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone to that. So £2,000, it could be for a customer service role, yeah, or it could be a sales executive. That's something, or receptionist, yeah. That's something where if I put an advert out on Read, Indeed, I know for a fact that I'm going to have 100 plus applicants. It's not going to be something that typically I'm going to be sourcing, I'm going to be looking, I'm going to be cold calling tons of people. People come to me for that, so that's a very easy fill. Now, obviously, working off that is not favorably for a company. A lot of bosses will push you to, go for 15 or 20%, which doesn't always work. Now, just to talk about my top 3 clients that I have, I'm obviously not going to name them, but I'll call them N, L, and T. So, typically for N, they're on a 10%. Excuse me. But however, I get job orders of about 6 a month. That's a huge amount. Typically, I pay probably about 2 a month placements. So in theory, the salary is about 20k for these. So I get about 4 to 6k from this company. 4 to 6k in total. Yeah. So, and that brings me to second company, which are on 15%, and this is probably my better client. Now, I have probably 10 plus job orders constantly, or they will always hire someone if I find someone that they're looking for. Typically, the salary is about 25k, so I typically get about three and a half to 4k for the placement. So three, let's just say 4k. So I probably sometimes I've placed 6 people in a month. Is my best, but it's usually, let's say, 1 to 6 a month. Yep, and that brings me to the second one, which is a sort of a very large company. They were on 10, and I moved it to 15% after that because they were very pleased. I had a 100% fill rate. Now, the reason I done that, I made a mistake at the start. So I was just wanting to get them on board because they're such a big name, and I was definitely confident I could help them out. Now, with that, I moved it to 15%, and they were very pleased. And it was a face-to-face meeting, and I said, look, typically I do charge 15%, and I can do the next 2 placements, but anything after that, I'm going to have to move it to 15%. So they had a meeting afterwards, and they said, yeah, that's totally fine. So they were very pleased with my work. If you try to negotiate fees afterwards, it's very difficult. I mean, I've only done this once or twice. I think most of the times it will be, we're not interested. We can work on 10. Typically, companies try to lower your percentage as well. So if you are doing business development or you're working in your own agency, I just want to put forward that the percentage doesn't matter. The reason being, I have companies on 20%. So if I have a company on 20% and I make no placements, 20% of nothing is nothing. So I don't care about percentage. Lowest I drop down to is probably 7 or 8, and I will do that if I can get an interview the next day. For that, the company has to really have good communication with me, be willing to interview anyone I put forward, and make the offer probably very quick if I do that. 10% is very good. Now, the reason 10% is amazing, companies, if you work really good and you're a good recruiter, they will look at the other agencies. I mean, I've worked with companies and I'm the only one on their PSL because they're confident I can fill the roles. And also, the other agencies are charging 18%. Now, if I'm coming in at 10% and I'm giving them more candidates, better candidates, and making more placements, and the candidates are staying there permanently, who do you think they're going to go with? Now, the percentage doesn't really matter. Obviously, bosses, you may be thinking, oh, if I charged 15%, I would have got £2,000 more. It doesn't always work like that because companies may not give you the jobs because they might say, oh, that's a £60,000 job. We can pay 6k, but we can't pay £10,000 in a fee for it. So what they typically do is, all right, let's try and really fill it and save some money. But if it's at 10%, they might say, okay, we're willing to pay that amount. There really is a lot of detail in it, and a lot of companies are different. Some have, £300,000 budget to spend on agencies a year. Some have, 50,000, or even one or two, or they have a policy where it could be if you are internal recruiters or HR team doesn't fill it in 6 weeks, it goes to external agencies. So it doesn't really matter. I would suggest, now what I done is I had, for example, if I had to start again and I had no clients, I would start charging 10%. Now, once I build up, let's say, 12 clients, some of which I'll be working on constantly, some of them I won't be, I will then move it to 12% as my offer. So any other client I bring on like that, and slowly work my way up, and then I'll end up at 15. And then when you actually do business development, after that, you're in a stronger position because you don't need those clients. You could be at 50 clients at that stage, some of which you've just made one placement, some you haven't, some is ongoing. You could be at 50 clients for that. Now, typically, I could push, if I know that other agencies, I could push to an 18 or 20%, depending on who the client is, what the role is, and if they're entertaining me in terms of meeting me and going through everything from there. So that's what I would suggest. I've made more money from accounts on 10% than I have at 15% or 20%. Typically, it's a very hard decision when a company's charging 20% or you're charging them 20%. For them to pay it, they really, really want you to go above and beyond. And usually, they want a candidate that isn't in the market. For example, they might want someone that's an accountant, but also a lawyer and speaks two languages, and they'll pay you 20%. It's virtually impossible to find someone like that. So, I mean, that's a bit of a weird analogy, but typically that's what companies see it. If I'm going to pay you 20%, I want this, 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 this. Company that works off 10% are the quick, easy fills. You can outperform other agencies, which is the key part. Now, just going back to it, I think starting off, if you haven't brought any clients on, your fees and your fee amount could be the issue. A lot of companies, if you say 18%, 15%, they'll say, no, we've already got 3 or 4 agencies on that amount. Why would we bring another one in? So if you come in at 10%, they'll be like, hold on a minute. If you're charging 10% and you're, an established agency working the same thing, I usually say to clients on calls, there's no difference. I'm not going to rip you off. I say to them, look, I'll be honest with you, you're going to pay a lot of money for our service if we're successful at it. 15% is going to be very expensive. I will still do a good amount of work at 10%, probably better than the other agencies. The reason I have so many clients trusting me, and there I'll name drop anyone in their industry as well, especially bigger or competition brands with them. And I'll say to them, 10% is what I charge. If you're happy, yeah, we can move it to 15%. And usually, no, we'll keep it at 10%. And I usually tell them I will be doing, if not more, using the same sources, doing probably the same amount of work and spending slightly more time on it, because that's just how I work, as the other agencies charging you 15%. From there, a client will probably, if they are willing to accept someone on, would say yes at that point, just to trial you. Now, I sometimes pitch a 10%, if I really want the client, as a first placement offer. Now that I put in my emails as well, because sometimes I had issues as it took me long to figure it out. 10% is quite cheap in certain industries, so they may feel, oh, you're not a good recruiter, so you have to charge really cheap. You get that sort of feel. So if you say 10% for the first placement, then yeah, and it's a good time for you to see how they work. If they take ages to get back on CVs, or they messed up all interviews and they never interviewed, or they took 3 weeks to make an offer and the candidate went elsewhere, typically you want to say, all right, it was 15%, it's 15% any other placement. But with this 10% offer, if they work really well and you can see them making money, this is what I done at the N and this placement as well. So company N, I actually was a first placement 10%, but after that it was just so easy to work with them. So I said, look, I'll keep it at 10%. Typically, if they move up to 15%, they may only give me two jobs out of the 6. They may say to me, okay, great, we'll give you the really hard to fill positions because you're at 15% now. So typically, I hope this video has been slightly entertaining. I'm sorry just to use text as well, but I hope I've explained it as best I can and give you my personal experience on what I charge as an agency.